Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Kamma daf Pei Hey, and we are at the top of Pei Hey, four lines down at the two dots, and I'm going to share my screen, and we will get started. So we are in the 8th chapter of Bava Kamma, and we are talking about something really interesting: the different forms of compensation that one must pay to the person that they injure. So if a person injures another person, 5 kinds of payment. Number one, damages. Again, we saw that that's a measure of the change in value associated with the person, essentially change in their slave value. We had the debate between Rashi and the Rush as to whether that's a Jewish kind of slave value, so it's the actual value that the person would receive if he sold himself as a slave, or is it the theoretical slave value of the person as a non-Jewish slave, because it means that they would be permanently sold to somebody, and that better reflects how much the damages should be. So that's damages. Pain, how much pain the person suffered, and we saw that yesterday. We dealt with that yesterday, and we saw that the amount of pain is, if we assume that the person's going to have they've been sentenced to have their hand cut off or whatever damage it is by the relevant authorities. So, it's easier to imagine this in a time when you have a king. So thankfully, we don't have that here in this country. But imagine somebody where in a country where the king could do whatever they want, and they sentence you to this particular outcome, that, whatever the injury is that was imposed on that person, on the victim, that's the injury that the government is going to impose. But the question is now that you have a chance to buy anesthesia. So how much would you pay for anesthesia associated with it? You're going to get the penalty. The person is going to have their leg broken. They're going to have whatever it is that the perpetrator did here. They're going to end up having that happen to them. But the question is, how much would they pay in order to avoid it? Then we saw healing. And so, one second. I apologize. The calculation for pain is what we're going to do this morning. I apologize. So I've already told you the answer. But all right, let's see that inside. We'll get to that in a moment. Healing. How much did the person need in terms of medicine and the like? Unemployment. We saw that we have to figure out how much the person would have gotten paid. But the point is that we view them in their current state. So depending on, and we'll see that later today as well. Embarrassment. Feel a little embarrassed by having gotten ahead of ourselves, but in any event, how much embarrassment is associated with the situation. So we will see also a little bit about that later today. All right, but apologies for getting ahead of ourselves and myself. And now let's jump right in with so far we've confirmed that damages are compensated monetarily, right? We say ayin tachas ayin. An eye for an eye does not mean, it does not have its literal meaning. You don't literally implement an eye for an eye. And we've confirmed that our Mishnah teaches that pain is paid even when there is no permanent bruise. So now, as we pick up at I should read what I have on the screen as opposed to just trying to do this from memory. Now, as we pick up with the dots, with the two dots on the fourth line of Pei Hey Amud Aleph, we review how we calculate the amount to be paid for pain. Okay, so Omdin Kamma Adam Kiyotze Bezeh Rotzalito. How much would a person like this take in order to get the punishment, to get that kind of pain? So Tsar B'makom Nezek Heikish Aminan. When you have permanent physical damage, meaning when there's going to be a damage payment, because you can imagine, remember in our Mishnah, we dealt with a situation where there's pain with no physical damage, and that's where the damage is done on the person's fingernail. So the object will clearly heal, and so as a result, thankfully, God willing, and so as a result, that's why you're not going to have a nezek payment. It's all going to be about the pain. Then you don't need to worry about what having double compensated. But when you have both a payment associated with a permanent physical change and pain, how do we make sure that we avoid double payment? Because you can't get paid twice for the same thing. So let's take a look. So Amar Abu de Shmuel, so the father of Shmuel said, Omdin Kamma Adam Rotzalito Likto Es Lo Yado. So we ask the average person on the street, essentially, how much they would have to get paid in order to have their hand cut off. Liktoa lo yado, in order to cut off that guy's hand, lo tsar lichudehu. Well, that's fundamentally going to have a problem with it, because if I tell you that I'm going to pay you how much would you take in order to cut off your hand? Well, of course, in that evaluation of how much you're going to cut off your hand, you will factor in the value of your hand in as an important limb. And so when you say that it's going to cost $20 million, part of that $20 million has nothing to do with the pain associated with losing that hand. It has to do with the losing the functionality of the hand on a permanent basis. So that's going to be a problem. Hakulu chamisha dvaramika. And because you're supposed to get, in fact, in that example, you're covering all 5 things, right? You're covering the pain. Everything is factored in. If you tell somebody, I'm going to cut off your hand, how much would you get paid? They're going to factor in the pain. They're going to factor in the healing. They're going to factor in the unemployment. They're going to factor in the embarrassment. They're going to factor in, and they're going to factor in the loss of value. They're going to factor in all 5 of the different kinds of valuation. V'od, b'shuftani askinan. Are we talking about people that are, not too bright? Are we fools? He has the defined shuftani here, because who's going to ever accept anything? Meaning, you're going to get ridiculous values in this first approach. So ella lectoa yado kakatua. So the question is, all right, your hand was already cut off. So how much? Or was effectively already cut off. So you already lost the value of your hand from all other perspectives. But now we're going to actually cut the hand off. And so Rashi explains, if we take a look about 15 lines down in Rashi, Yadoa Ketua, Umechuberet Begidin, it's Tzemutin. That in fact, we're talking about a situation where the hand has been cut off, but its limbs, but it's actually still attached. So therefore, you're going to still suffer all of the pain that's associated with it, but it's a limb that is already not useful. And it's not currently capable of doing any work. So as a result, there's not going to be any change in your value, because you already are valued as if you don't have a hand. But you will have the pain that's associated with. So, but even that, there's a problem, because yadu hakatu nami lo tsar luchudeika. The issue is that if you say that you're dealing with that situation, there's not only pain. Hatsar uboshazika, there's going to be some kind of humiliation. De chesifa le milsa lemishkal mibisaro lemishidje leklavim, because your hand is going to convert from something that is just part of your flesh, that's part of your body, that at least you have a hand, to something that you would throw to the dogs, which is a very awful way of referring to something that gets amputated. But in any event, that's a situation where you would say maybe that, hey, I'm also going to be suffering some level of embarrassment associated with it. So we come to effort number 3. Ela omdin kama adam rotzalito liktoa lo yado hamuchtav l'malchus. That, if bein sam l'sayif, that if you were to have we're going to take a look at somebody who has been sentenced, that that if in fact you've been sentenced to have your hand cut off, and you're going to have your hand cut off with certain kind of medication, so there won't be any pain, that effectively will eliminate your usage of your hand. But now you're being asked, okay, if you, instead of using the medicine, we were to just cut your hand off, how much would it take for you to be willing to do that? So again, it's how much are you willing to accept in that situation? So Amrei, hachanami lo shakel mitzar nafshi. People won't accept money for pain. Nobody will accept any kind of amount. So that's kind of ridiculous. Ella omdin kama adam rotza litain how much would a person give liktoa lo yado hamuchtav lamalchus bein sayef lusam. So now we're going to change it and we reverse the order. The government has said we're going to cut off your hand. So now we're not going to ask you how much would you accept in order to change it from the medicine, which is painless, to the sword, which is painful. We're going to say, okay, we're going to chop your hand off with a sword. But now you have a chance to decide that, you know what, you can pay some amount of money and thereby get the medicine. So how much would you pay for that? But one second, that doesn't work, because why have we been focusing on how much would a person accept? Because Hailito, because when Abba Shmuel, when Shmuel Avud Shmuel made his statement, he said, Omdin Kamma Adam Rotza Lito Likto Lo Yado. How much a person would accept, would take in order to have their hand cut off. But here we're talking about a situation with how much a person would give. Litain mi baile. The Gemara should have said, and Abu Shmuel should have said that how much would a person give in connection with that. So Amar Rav Huna braid the Rav Yoshua, that's not an issue. So Li told me zeh ma shenasan zeh. That in fact, when we say take, it means we're going to the person who was the victim is going to take what the other person who is the theoretical construct would have paid. And that's what we mean. And so as a result, we've come to the conclusion, and our conclusion is that when you figure out pain, you ask the person, listen, you ask the person on the street who has a similar kind of disposition as the person who is the victim. And you say, okay, this government has now sentenced you to lose your arm. And how much would you pay in order to lose your arm in a no pain situation? And how much would you, because otherwise we're going to do it in the painful situation. And the answer is that's how much the person gets paid for the pain that they have suffered. Okay, so that is pain. Next, the Gemara turns to healing. And we ask the question, and we want to understand. So we're going to teach two brisas in connection with healing. So brisa number one, Tana Rabbanan, learned in a brisa. Alubot smachim machmasamaka. If you end up having some kind of resulting issue, smachim here are defined as sores that are result from the original wound. Venistera hamaka, or the wound came back. And here we're talking about a situation, presumably, where the wound was not fully healed, but it got worse again. So then the person who caused the damage needs to help with the healing. And he has to help with the lost employment. Shalom machmasamaka, but if it was not the result of the initial wound, well then eino chayav l'rapoto. He's not going to be obligated to heal him. Ve'eino chayav litain lo d'mei shivto, and he's not going to be obligated to pay him the loss of employment. Now we're going to ask in the Gemara shortly about this brisa. Why would you ever have thought that you would be obligated to pay for a wound, something that resulted from that did not result from the wound, the underlying wound? And so we'll answer that shortly. But in any event, let's continue with this brisa. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Av machmas hamake, even if the sores came because of the wound, chayav l'rapo. So you have to heal them. You're going to have to pay for the medicine. But the resulting if the resulting sores cause a loss of employment, those sores are not going to trigger the payment for the fact that the guy can't work. The Chachamim omrim shivto urefuaso kol shechaya b'sheves chaya b'ripoy. And the Chachamim say, in a last opinion, a third opinion, that whenever you are obligated to pay for loss of employment, then you're obligated to pay for healing. And if you're not obligated for loss of employment, then you're not obligated for healing. And so as a result, if you're not obligated for loss of employment for these sores, so then you're also not going to be obligated for healing in connection with the sores. And so as a result, you're not going to be liable for either. Okay. So that is the brisa. And now we're going to try to understand what is the fundamental disagreement among these three different opinions. So, my kamifliki, what are they arguing about? So, Amar Rabba, Rabba is going to offer two explanations. Explanation one is Ashkachtinu l'Rabbanan b'vei Rav d'Yosve v'Kamre. I saw some students that were rabbinical students that were sitting in the yeshiva of Rav, sitting in rabbinical school, and they were asking this question, and they were saying about this particular issue. Hacha b'maka, and then after Rabbah gives the answer that the students were saying, so then he's going to give his own answer. But let's take a look and see what answer number one is. Hacha b'maka nitna le'eged kamifliki. That we're talking about a situation with whether a wound, whether some kind of damage that you have on your body, is it something that you can automatically bandage? Meaning, because we're worried that if you put a bandage on it, especially a bandage that doesn't have any kind of medicine that we have in modern days, it can actually cause the wound to an infection and cause the sores to develop. And so we're going to assume the Gemara's understanding that the bandage is causing the sores. So do we say that because, of course, we want you to put the bandage on so that you don't get everything bloody and disgusting, and therefore it's assumed that you can put on a bandage? Or do we say, no, you have to do the things that allow you to heal the fastest? And if healing the fastest involves not putting on the bandage, well, then you shouldn't put on a bandage. So Rabbanan Savre Maka Nitna Le'eged. The first rabbis, the Tanna Kamma, said that you're supposed to put on a bandage. And so therefore, you're going to have to pay for the pain associated with the sores, because everybody assumes that you're going to put on the bandage. And so putting on the bandage that leads to sores is a natural process, a part of the original wound. And so therefore, the person who caused the wound is going to have to pay for those sores. Rabbi Yehuda savar maka lo nitna le'eged, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. The bandaging is not a presumption, and rather ripoy detana beikra. We have but why do you need to pay for the healing even when you do bandage it and you get and you aggravate the situation and sores develop? The reason that you have to pay for the healing is because we have in the pasuk rapo yirapeh, that you have to heal. Healing he shall heal. So mechayev. So as a result, that's why the perpetrator, the person who did the damage, is going to be liable. But sheves de lo tana beikra, where we don't have a repetition, it doesn't say shavot yishavet or something along those lines. So lo mechayev. So as a result, therefore you're not going to be liable in this situation because you didn't really need to bandage the wound. And indeed, you weren't supposed to bandage the wound. But Rabbah says something different. Aminu lahu ana. And here's what I told them. If in fact a bandaging for a wound, you're not supposed to bandage a wound, well then ripoinami lo mechayev. Then you wouldn't even be obligated in connection with the healing either. Meaning that's not a good explanation, because Rabbi Yehuda would not say in that situation that you're obligated even in healing. Really, everybody acknowledges that really you're supposed to bandage a wound. However, you have to be careful not to put on too much bandaging, because if you put too much bandaging on, that's where you're going to have a problem. So Rabbi Yehuda savar kaven de lo nit le'eged yisera. So if in fact you did put on too much bandaging, and Rabbi Yehuda says since it's not supposed to have excess banding, so then ripoy detana beikra, when you have healing, which is what repeated in the Torah, so then mechayev. But sheves de lo tana beikra lo mechayev. But when it comes to the unemployment, which doesn't have a double reference in the Torah, so you would not be obligated. The Rabbanan Sabre but the rabbis, the Tanna Kamma, say the following: Since there's the double language by healing, so we're also going to have the requirement to pay for it also in connection with unemployment. The idkish l'ripui, because those two things are connected to one another because they're right next to each other in the Torah. Rabbi Yehuda savar sheves lo mechayev dema'ate rachmana rak. So why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda agree that the juxtaposition says that sheves should also be subject? Because the Torah says rak. If we take a look at the pasuk, it says rak shivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh. So the rak that applies suggests that there's some kind of limitation to what we're about to say, and therefore we're not going to apply this juxtaposition to go one from the other. Rabbanan rak shalishalo machmas hamaka huda asa, and rak, according to the rabbis, says no. That's because that excludes sores that didn't come because of the makkah, that they came for some other reason. And so as a result, that's why you would not have to do it. And so as a result, that's the situation. Okay, so the point is we have the disagreement. The rabbis, the first rabbis in the Tanna Kamma, says we tie together healing and unemployment, and because we have the double language of healing, we're going to expand healing to even cover bandaging a wound if you do it too much, as long as there's supposed to be some bandages. Because we recognize that some people will make mistakes, and so as a result, we want to try and incorporate that. And because we have the double language by healing, we'll also and we have a juxtaposition to unemployment, so we'll also apply require you to pay for the unemployment. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no, the double language is only by healing, so it's only by healing. The Rabbanan Basrai, well, what about the third opinion that says you don't have to pay for anything? To Amri kol shechaya b'sheves chaya b'ripoy, kol she'enu chaya b'sheves enu chaya b'ripoy. They say that if you're not obligated to pay for the loss of employment, you won't be obligated to pay for healing. So as a result, we are going to say that you're not obligated for any kind of healing or unemployment if you do too much bandaging. So ripoy did tanabe. So why do I have rapo yirapeh? Why does it tell me the double language in the Torah? So we need that for the teaching of Rabbi Yishmael's of yeshiva. The Tanya debate Rabbi Yishmael, because they taught in Rabbi Yishmael's yeshiva. Rapo yirapeh. That what does the double language teach us? Mikan shenitan rishus l'rofe l'rapot. That we allow a doctor to engage in healing based on this pasuk. So Tosfos asks the question, if we take a look at the second last Tosfos on Pei Hey Amud Aleph, but Im Tomer B'Hamirapei L'Chudei Shamin Lei. We could learn that just from a single reference to healing. Why do I need to double it? Yesh Lomer Dahava Amina Hani Mili Maka B'Idei Adam Aval Chole Haba B'Idei Shamayim Kishemirape Nira Kesoter Gzeres Hamelech Kamash Malan Deshari. That when it comes to, I might have thought that if we only had one reference to healing in the Torah, and we said that you could heal the situation, maybe you would only be allowed to heal a situation that was caused by a person. Meaning, if a person caused you an injury, well, then of course you got to be able to heal it. But if the situation, if some kind of injury happened, through an act of God, so to speak, so then maybe I would think that that's a kind of a gzera from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's a decree from God, and therefore you should have to suffer with it. So therefore, Kamash Malan Deshari, that even in that situation, we say that it is permitted. Okay, so now a second brisa. Tan Rabbanan Minayin Shim Alu Bo Tzmacha Machmas Hamaka V'Nistera Hamaka Shechayav L'Rapoto. How do I know that if you have sores that develop because of the wound, or if the wound comes back, so that you're obligated to continue to heal the person, and you have to pay for his unemployment? Tamalomar rak shivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh. That the Torah says that only for his lost employment shall he pay, and he shall heal, and heal he shall heal. So Yachal Afilu Shalom Achmas Hamaka. Now I might have thought that even if it was not because of the wound, you would have to heal the guy. So Talmud Lomar Rak, That's why it says only. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer, Af machas hamaka pater. No, even if the wound came because of, even if the sores came because of the wound, you would also not be liable. Shneamar rak, because it says rak. So now we're going to try and explain Rabbi Yossi and align him with the opinions in the previous brisa. So let's take a look. So Ikada Amri, there are those who say, Ach machmas hamaka pater, when Rabbi Yossi says that even if the wound came because of the, I'm sorry, even if the sores came because of the wound, you would not be liable. It means legamri, to the Rabbanan Basrai. It's because he holds like the last rabbis. And the last rabbis say, right, if you ended up bandaging too much, then you would be not obligated either in the sores or in a returning, in this in connection with the sores or the returning injury. You would not be liable whether you're talking about the healing or you're talking about unemployment. The Ika de Amri, and there are those who say that no, Rabbi Yossi's statement of being of exempt, of being not liable, is not so broad as to all situations, but af machmas hamaka pater. That what does he mean by even when it came because of the wound, you're not liable? It's just mishebet. It's only from unemployment. And he would be obligated still in healing. Kamman, and who would that be like? Well, that would be like the second opinion in the first brisa, and that's Rabbi Yehuda. Well, guess what? Rabbi Yehuda, and when you look at Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, that's his father. So that's what we're situation. So we're talking about he would be agreeing with his father. Okay, so that is the story. So now Amar Mar. So we're going to say we just said in this brisa, Yochel afilu shalom machmas hamaka. I don't understand. I would have thought that even if it came not because of the wound. So Tamaloma rak, and that's why the Torah told us rak. Shalom machmas hamaka boy kra. Why would you ever need a pasuk to tell a person that you would not be liable for something that did not result from the original wound? Of course, the perpetrator shouldn't be liable for that because it didn't come from, it wasn't his fault. So Umri, my shalom machmas hamaka. What does it mean? Not because of the wound. Kidatanya, it's like another brisa. Haresha abar al divrei rofe. If you disobeyed what the doctor said, and you had some kind of sweets, because having sweets was apparently known to not be good for you even back then, although they were saying that it's not good for somebody who's got some kind of wound. So gargusni, and it's going to cause the wound to develop into gargusni. So, and we'll see what gargusni is in a moment. So I might have thought that, listen, you may not have listened to your doctor, but you should, but for the original wound, this wouldn't have happened. And so as a result, maybe I would say that you should still be liable. So Talmud Lomer, Rak. Therefore, the Torah says only to tell us that even that in that situation where you don't listen to your doctor, the perpetrator is not going to be liable to you. So my gargusni, what is this gargusni? So Amar Abaye, Nasa Krechsa, that it's Nasa Krechsa. Of course, I have no idea what Nachasa Krechsa is. So, but fortunately, Rashi tells us that if you take a look, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12 lines up, Nasa Krechsa, Basar Mace, it's dead flesh. So basically, the concern that some kind of gangrene exactly might result if you end up having too much sweets. And now, of course, that actually is consistent with somebody who has diabetes. So it's interesting to think that they had some kind of inkling associated with that. All right. Well, my also say, what's the cure to prevent this dead flesh situation? So ahala here defined as aloe, the kira. Rashi tells us sha'ava, wax, the kalba, and Rashi tells us resina, it's some kind of resin, that is on the sort of the inside of the barrels of wine. So there's some kind of thing that comes there. Basically, there are these various kinds of ointment, yeah, exactly, that might actually be helpful. All right. So now that we've dealt with those situations, so the Gemara is going to detail limitations on what the damager and victim can say to one another regarding the money for healing. So let's take a look. So the Amarle. So what happens if the perpetrator says, Asyach Ana, listen, I'm going to heal you myself. I happen to be a doctor. Yes, I broke your leg, but I'm a doctor. I will fix it. So Amarle, the person who was the victim, he can say back to the guy, Dumis ale ka arye arva. You to me, you look more like a lion that is ready to pounce. So the Amarle, and if the person said, okay, so that's case number one, and of course we can understand it. Meaning, if you cause the damage, then I have the right to say to you, no, I don't want you to fix me. All right. Well, what about the following situation? V'i Amarle, my sina asya demugan b'mugan. Listen, I have a good friend, and indeed Rashi says that we're talking about where he happens to be related to the doctor, and he's going to heal you for nothing. So as a result, I don't, let him heal you, and I'm going to deal with the payment basically. And the answer is that he's and he doesn't actually pay. That's the key. Is that I'm trying to get away without paying because maybe somebody owes me a favor. But the bottom line is the doctor isn't being paid his full fee. So Amar Lay, so that in that situation, the victim can say, listen, us you demuggin b'muggin, that you pay nothing, you get nothing. If you tell me, I'm not interested in a free doctor. So Muggin Shava. And if you give me a doctor that's getting nothing, then he's worth nothing. The Amar, what about the third case? Maisina Lach Asya Rechika. Listen, I know the expert in this, and he comes from far away, and he's gonna come and he'll take a look at you. So Amar Le, Asya Rechika Aina Avira. No, listen, a doctor from far away, he can blind you. And Rashi explains, Eina Avira. If we take a look 6 lines up in Rashi, Sha'asid Leilech Ladarko. Eventually, this guy's going to go back home. So he's going to go back in his way. Ve'ein Choshesh, and he's not going to worry about im iver eino shalzeh. He's not going to worry about whether or not he blinds somebody. The bottom line is that if you bring somebody in from another country, another city, another state, and there's no possible implication on the guy's reputation, he's not necessarily going to give the same kind of care that that the person who would be local would give. Now, if we, applying these to modern day is a little bit more complicated because, of course, now we have social media, etc., and so maybe it would become known. But the bottom line is that in each of these cases, the victim could say, "No, thanks. I want to choose my own doctor, and I want to pay for him, and I want to pay for him, and I want you. I want to pay for him because I want him to know that he's going to take good care of me, and I want you to reimburse me for my liability." The Amar. So now, what about in the other direction? The Amar, my sina lach asya. I'm sorry. So now in the other direction. So the Amar lay haich. If the other guy says to him, "Have lead l'didi v'ana misina l'nafshai." Listen, I'm a doctor, but I want you to pay me my own payment, and I'm going to take care of healing myself. So Amar lay. So the perpetrator can say, "Listen, push up and nafshach v'shakalt minay tvei." Maybe you're going to not do as good a job. You're going to be negligent, and in fact, I'll end up having to pay extra as a result of you healing yourself. I want to make sure you have a good doctor, not just any random guy, and not just yourself. The Amrlay, and if the victim says, "Kotzli mikatz," well, listen, you don't need to worry about it. We'll fix the amount. So as a result, Amar Le, the person can say, no, if we have no further amount that I'm going to owe you, you're certainly going to be liable because you'll want to cut corners and keep some of the money. The karuli shor hamazik, and you're going to walk around with some kind of injury, and everybody's going to say, "Oh, that's the injury that David caused. I don't want to deal with David, so I don't want that kind of reputation." And so, as a result, therefore, we're going to be concerned about it. So, the bottom line is it seems like we are both worried that um the victim is going to cheap it out, and we're worried that the perpetrator is going to cheap it out. So we need both of them effectively to work together to find a good doctor to ensure that they're going to be healed. So all right, so Tana. So now we have a brisa. V'kulan mishtalmin b'makom nezek. All of these things, all the other four payments, are required to be paid, even in a case where there's no even when in a case where you have to pay for damages. So because maybe I might have thought that everything gets incorporated in the damages, as we saw in connection with pain. No, we're not going to say that. So minahani mili, how do I know that this is in fact true? That it's not double paying when you pay for damages, pain, unemployment, um, unemployment, uh, uh, what am I missing? Unemployment, embarrassment, and healing. Right. So how do I know that all of those are covered? So so now the Gemara is going to offer two different explanations. So both in the name of Rava. So Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava Amar Kra Petzatakas Patza. So we have this word, this phrase, Petzatakas Patza, a wound for a wound. So litain sar b'makom nezek. So that teaches us that even when you have a pain penalty, so you're going to also even that you have to give compensation for pain, even when you've already given compensation for damages. So Jaime Baile, but 1 second, we already used Petza Takas Patza for another purpose as we turn to pay Hey Amad Bet. L'Rabos Shogeg Kemezid, to tell us that the onus karatzon, and to tell us that if you did it unintentionally, you're going to have to pay just as if you did it intentionally. And if you did it unwillingly, you're going to have to pay just as if you did it willingly. Well, so as a result, how do I learn two things from the same language? So imkein nichtav kra petza b'patza. That it could have written it not petza tachas patza, but petza b'patza. That again, like just as we had yad biyad, we could have had petza b'patza. That a wound, again, that both mean effectively the same thing, a wound for a wound, but here we're going to have a shorter language, and we didn't need to have the extra word takas. So my petza takas patza, shmamina tarti. So we can learn both from that. So Rav Papa, Mishmei de Rava Amar, Amar Kra v'Rapo Yirapeh. No, so Rav Papa said in the name of Rava a second answer. It's not because of petza takas patza, but it's the double language of you shall surely heal. Litin refuah b'makom nezek. That tells you that even when you have to pay nezek, you also are going to have to pay for healing. So Haimi Boile, look at the Tana, the Bei Rabbi Yishmael. But 1 second, what about the teaching of Bei Rabbi Yishmael, that who learned from Virapo Yirapeh, as we saw a few moments ago? The Tana de Bei Rabbi Yishmael Virapo Yirapeh mikan shenitna drishus l'rofe l'rapot. That this is how we know doctors are allowed to heal. Well, Im Kane, if we wanted to just teach us the fact that doctors are allowed to heal, nichtov krav virofe yirapeh. We could have just had that the physician shall heal. How come? So now that we had virapo yirapeh, so what do we learn from that? Shma mina litain refuah b'makom nezek. So the fact that we say rapo yirapeh instead of virofe yirapeh, that a doctor should heal, so we have a more general language. So the more general language teaches us that also healing needs to be paid for even when there's damages. Vakati mi boile ligata amran. But 1 second, don't we need these words of Verapo Yirapeh to tell us in the first day, Lemisne Bay Krabe Ripoy, to tell us that that you still need to pay for sores that develop as a result of the wound, and that's what we said a few moments ago, as we cited the earlier brisa. So im kain lema kra o rapo yirap o rapo rapo o yirapeh yirapeh. My virapo yirape. Why does the language change? Meaning we could have just used a double language that repeated the same word. The fact that we're using two different words, shma mina litain refuah b'makom nezek. So that teaches us that we also pay the compensation even when there is damages as well. So we get to learn three things from this verse. The first is that you have to pay for healing. And in some ways, it's four things. We have to pay for healing. We have to pay for sores that develop because of the wound. We have to pay for, and we allow a doctor to heal, and we pay for healing even when there is damage. So there are four different things that we effectively learn from Virapo Yirape. So all of this implies miklal demeshkachas lahu shelo b'makom nezek. That if we need a teaching to tell us that we're going to have to pay these four additional forms of damage when you actually also pay for nezek damages, so then you certainly are going to have to pay for them when they are on their own. So shelo b'makom nezek heiki mishkachas lahu. How do we find each of these four situations in a situation where you would end up having to pay just for the additional kind of damage and not for the underlying and not for any underlying nezek? So let's take a look. So tsar kidakatani, the pain is like we saw because tsar kabao b'shapud obamasmer, that if you burn the person with a spit or a nail, ba'afilu al tziporno, and specifically if you do it on the person's fingernail, b'makom she'ena osa chabura, where there's no permanent wound because the fingernail will grow back. So in those situations, you're going to say that in fact there's no permanent damage, so there's no nezek, but there is pain, and we'll have to pay for it. So ripoi, how about healing? What's the situation there? Dahava ka'ev le midi v'salik. It's where you had something, a person needed some kind of healing. V'aidile sama charifa, and the person put on the guy some kind of pain, some kind of ointment that created v'achvarei levisrei, and caused his flesh to become white. And so as a result, now you've got a person that effectively all you've done is turn this person flesh into this white flesh, and it needs healing. And so now the person needs to get some additional medicine in order to fix the color of his flesh. And so as a result, that's a situation where all you need is medicine. There is no pain associated with it. There is no other kind of issue associated with it because it was already, I guess the reason that you would need to deal with the fact that there was already an injury there is to say, basically, look, you already had an injury there, so the flesh wasn't the right color anyway, and now you're at least healed, but here you have the wrong colored flesh. And so so as a result, the only thing that you need is further healing. There is no embarrassment or pain or unemployment that is required, and there's no reduction in the value of the person either. So in that situation, all you have to do is pay for the healing. Sheves, how about unemployment? Where would you only have to pay for unemployment? Dahadke in Durona, where you lock the person in their room. Uvatle, and as a result, they weren't able to go to work. Boshes, how about embarrassment? Would you only have to pay for embarrassment? Dirak ba'ape, if you spit in his face, so then obviously there's no other kind of damage that's associated with it. There's no healing, no unemployment, but there's embarrassment, so you'd have to pay for that. Okay. So Sheves Rowan Oso Ki'iluhu Shomer Kishuin. Now we said that when it comes to unemployment, we view the person as if they were watching cucumbers. So Tanarabanan, we're going to have a brisa that's going to highlight. I'm sorry, I didn't scroll. So we're going to have a brisa that and we're going to explain a brisa. So that tells us exactly how much how you pay for these damages. So Sheves Rowan Oso Ki'iluhu Shomer Kishuin. Be'im Tomer Laksa Midas Adin. And if you say that this is somehow unfair, and now the Gemara explains why it isn't unfair, to keep miftach high gavra, because when this person gets better, kimispach high gabra, when this person gets better, lav agra de shomer kishuin hu shakel, he won't just be a cucumber watcher. So why are you paying him now like a cucumber watcher? Ella dale davla vishakel agra. He's going to get more wages. He's going to, he'll be able to draw water from wells. Or inami, because meaning the point is that now he can't do heavy lifting. All he can do is walk around. So he's just watching the cucumbers to make sure no animals come in or people come in. But now, when he gets his hands back, he'll be able to do actual work. Inami azal b'shalir v'shakil agra, or he'll be able to be a messenger, and he'll be able to even get more. So why is that not unfair that we're only paying him like a cucumber watcher? Midas adin lo lakta. No, it's not actually undermining justice. Shekvar nasan lo dmei yado udmei raglo, because we've already paid him by paying the nezek, by paying the reduction in his value. We've effectively paid him for his prior job. So as a result, that's why we don't have to pay unemployment based on his eventual job or his prior job. So Amarava, so now we're going to give some examples. Kata es yado, if the person's hand got cut off, so nosin lo deme yado, you have to pay the value of the hand, the shevis. And when it comes to unemployment, roan oto ki'ilu hu shomer kishuin, you view him as like a cucumber guard, because he can't do heavy lifting, but he can watch and protect. Shiberes raglo, if you broke his foot, so then nosin lo deme raglo, you have to pay for the value of the foot, the sheves. And when it comes to the unemployment, roan oto ki'ilu hu shomer es a pesach, you have to view him as if he was a guard of a door, because you can't walk around, so he can't walk around a garden the way a cucumber guard would need to, but he can watch a guard because he doesn't need to get up and move. The simeus eno, what happens if you blind his eye? Well, then no se lo eno. Listen, you can give him the value of his eye. That's of course what you have to do from a nezik perspective. Vishevis, and when it comes to unemployment, roan oto ki'iluhu matchino berichayim. You look at him as if he's somebody who's grinding at the millstone, because there all you have to do is push. You're going around in a circle. You don't have to be able to see anything. All you have to do is be able to hear, and you'll be fine. However, show, if the person is deaf, so then, and on some level we're understanding, that well, if we understand that the person is actually working at the grindstone, well, then he's blind but still has his hands and feet. But we could also understand this as that he's a millstone encourager. He's basically at the millstone saying, push, push, push. In which case, he doesn't need to be able to see or have hands or have legs, because he's all in one place. He's just doing the encouragement. But now, if on top of everything else, he became deaf as well, well, then doesn't have any kind of value. So nosin lo dmei kulo. He has to pay the total amount. So that's the situation. So we have those 4 examples that Rava gave, and now Rava is going to ask a question. So by Rava wondered, kata es yado v'lo amaduhu. If the guy first cut the guy's hand off, but they never assessed him for how much it was worth, shibir es raglo v'lo amaduhu. And then, and Rashi explains here that we're talking about the same guy, the same perpetrator now also breaks the guy's leg. This is terrible, and they still didn't charge the perpetrator for the damages. Simeus Eno, and now he blinded the guy, and they still haven't charged him for his charges. And now he in the end made the guy deaf. So now the guy's no hand, no legs, no seeing, no hearing. So Mahu, what are we talking about? What's the law? Miamrin and Kaven de lo amaduhu. Do we say that because he has not been assessed at all until this point, one assessment for the whole thing is sufficient, and you give him basically the total value, or do we say that you have to give each one individually? Nafkamine, what's the difference? How do I determine the difference? that fundamentally the issue is only in connection with the pain and the embarrassment of each stage of the injury. That when it comes to the physical damage and the healing and the unemployment, all of those, they aren't going to change whether or not, it doesn't make a difference whether you give it on each injury individually or on all of the injuries. To Kavan, to Yayav, to make Kool-Aid, because at the end of the day, you're going to give the guy in this situation his full and total value as a slave. And so, Kaman de Cutley dummy, it's almost like you killed him. The ha yahiv lay to make Kool-Aid, because you're giving him the total value. And and what about the healing and the unemployment? Well, again, the unemployment and the damage will both be covered in the total value. And when it comes to the healing, Rashi explains that we're talking about a situation where there has been no effort to heal the guy in between each of the injuries. And so as a result, he hasn't had any suffering of out-of-pocket expenses for the healing. So as a result, the final healing is the only healing. So tsaru boshas mias the kolchada v'chada yahib. So do we say that maybe he has to still give the pain and embarrassment for each of the pieces? Dahahavale tsaru boshas, because he will still have pain and humiliation each time. Or do we say no? The imtim Salamar, and if we do say Kavan de lo amaduhu, that because in this case he was not estimated his value, he would get everything all in one shot. And amaduhu mahu, what if they did assess him, but the person never paid? Miamrin Kavan de amaduhu chada chada boy lemesavle. Do we have to say that because they already assessed him, they have to the perpetrator has to pay each piece individually? Oh, Dilma came into low shalom, or do we say because he hasn't yet paid, Yovle Demekule, it's sufficient, he can just pay the whole thing? So Teku, we leave it undetermined. Yeah. And so as a result, we'll end there and we'll pick up, God willing, on Shabbat, Motzi Shabbos at that point. But the answer is that, in this particular situation, I believe that we end up saying that the question is that we would not, in fact, as is often the case, because of the concept of motzi mechaveru olav araya, we would not, in fact, cause the person to have to pay the money. But if the victim was able to grab the assets of the perpetrator, then we would potentially allow him to retain those assets because of this same uncertainty, because of, again, hamotzi mechaveru olav araya. So we'll stop there. And again, now what's the question next? So what happens if this if the entire injury is temporary? That's the next question. So if you want to know the answer to that, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Look forward to continuing our learning together. And again, reminder that next week and the week after, and I think 1 week after that, God willing, we'll be learning in person as well, Monday through Friday. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a wonderful Shabbos.